Hi guys, Mark here, and today we're going to have a look at the solution for day 8 of the Advent of Code challenge in both C# and F#. And today I'm hopefully recording with the correct microphone. Apologies that the sound quality wasn't brilliant yesterday, although you're still very likely to hear my children shouting and banging around outside the room. So let's have a look at the challenge for day 8. And Eric has been kind to us. This challenge isn't quite as difficult as the one we had to solve yesterday. And it's to do with escaping strings. So we've got a load of strings in this kind of format. They're surrounded with quotes, and they've got some backslash quote for a quote, double backslashes, and even some \x followed by 2 hexadecimal digits. So the challenge is simply to go through all of the strings in our input and compare the length of the escaped version, including the start and end quotes, with the length of the unescaped version, and just sum together all the differences. So let's go to LinkPad and have a look at how I attempted that in C#. So I start off just reading all the lines from the input from a file, and then for each line I create an anonymous object with the escaped version, which is just the line I read from the file, and then my own code to unescape it. Now, some programming languages will have an eval function, which is a nice, quick and easy way for them to solve this, because they can just evaluate a string as though it was some code and let the compiler work out what the unescaped version is. That's not so easy in C#. I think there is a way you can do it with Roslyn, but actually I decided that even if I could do it with Roslyn, I'd rather do it myself, just in case part B of the puzzle introduced some strange and unusual escaping rules. So what I do is, first of all, I take the substring to cut off the start and end quotations. Then I replace all the backslash quote with just a single quote, and I replace all of the double backslashes with a question mark. And it doesn't really matter what I replace it with as long as it's the right length, because we only really care about the length of the strings. And part of the reason for replacing it with a question mark is that from experience in the past, I know that when you're escaping and unescaping strings, it's very easy to accidentally get yourself in a mess by doing your replacements in the wrong order. So I've just prevented myself from getting into trouble here. And the very last replacement I do is with a regular expression, and that's to pick out these \x followed by 2 hexadecimal digits. And to say it's a hexadecimal digit, you can say it's a number from 0 to 9 or a letter from A to F, and there are exactly 2 of them. And again, I'm just replacing that with question mark. I don't really need to work out what the actual character that this escaped sequence is representing in order to solve the puzzle. Then once I've done that, it's really easy. The sum extension method in Link actually lets you pass in a lambda expression to say what you want to sum by. So I want to sum by the escaped length minus the unescaped length, and that was part A. As for part B of the problem, well, actually you just had to go backwards. You took all of these strings in the input file. Let me just pop that back up. You took all of these strings and then re-escaped them as though they hadn't been escaped in the first place, so they'll get even longer. And so it's the same approach really. You start off with all the lines in the file, you keep the original, and then you escape them by putting a quote at the beginning and end and replacing all of the backslashes with double backslash and all of the quotation marks with backslash quotation mark. And again, remember to get your replacements in the right order, or you'll end up replacing some of the things that you've already replaced. And again, it's very similar. You just subtract the escape length from the original length and pass that into the sum method. And again, a handy tip, if you're using LinkPad, you can put a .dump anywhere in your link pipeline if you just want to check things out. So if I have a dump here in the middle of this second part and I run it, then we'll see that as well as the outputs, I can compare my original strings with my escaped strings just to check that I'm doing things correctly. Now, I did come up with one slightly crazy idea for how we might solve this using the C# compiler, and that was if I pasted all of my strings into my code and said that they were actually members of an array and put a comma at the end of each one, then what I could do is I could still read in all my strings from a file, but I could then zip it together with the ones in the source code, and so allowing the C# compiler to unescape these strings. The zip method, by the way, just takes two sequences with the same number of elements in each one and gives you each pair of elements. So when I get A and B, that's a string from my code and a string from the file, I just select those into a anonymous object and then I subtract the lengths. Unfortunately, when I ran this, I got a different answer. And so what I did was I put some code in to also include my original solution, and just to find out where the difference was. And what we see is that the C# compiler, when it sees a \x and then 3 hexadecimal digits, it assumes that this is some kind of extended Unicode character. And so basically, if you pass a string like this in, \x04b, that doesn't come out as some character followed by a lowercase b. It interprets the whole thing as a single character. And so even if C# did have a nice eval method, unfortunately it would fail this problem. So let's have a very quick look at how I solved this in F#. Again, I tried to create a number of handy little helper functions, and I created some constants here for quote, \, quote, and \, just to make my code a bit more readable. And I made an unescape and an escape method that just really work exactly the same way as the C# versions did. But then, to avoid some code duplication, I made this helper method called sum the difference of lengths, where you pass in your strings and then you pass in a function that transforms each string into a tuple. And that way we can then map those strings across the function to get the tuples, and then call F# has got sum by, which is the equivalent of link's sum method, to allow us to subtract the lengths. And so to solve part A, I basically pass in a function that turns a string into a tuple of the string and an unescaped version. And to solve part B, I pass in a function that turns into a tuple of an escaped version and the original. And so when we run this in F#, and LinkPad is once again being very slow for me, we'll see that we're getting exactly the same answers in F# as we're getting in C#. And as usual, after I'd got my solution, I did have a quick look on the subreddit to see if anyone had solved it in a really interesting or elegant way. And probably the favourite solution I came across was this really nice little two-liner from Orangut. And it's been done in Python. Basically, for the first one, he was able to take advantage of the fact that Python has got an eval method, and so can just compare the length of each string. This -1 just chops off a \n off the end of each line with the length of the evaluated version. And for the second part, he realized that actually you don't need to escape the string. You can just work out by how much the length of the string will grow by adding 2 for the quote at the beginning and end, and then an extra 1 for each \, and quotation in the original string. So I thought that was a really elegant solution. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you for tomorrow's problem.